Okay, our third assignment is our interview assignment, and we're going to talk about the interview assignment today. If you go into video production in Omaha, Nebraska, or in the Midwest, you're going to do a lot of interviews. Okay, you're going to do testimonials for commercials. You're going to work in news, and you're going to interview people on a daily basis. When I did corporate industrial videos, I interviewed people all the time. That was probably I've probably done more interviews than almost anything with things you do. I have a student that just talked to a class, and he said they did a interview with Steven Spielberg for a project that he did for Netflix. And it was kind of cool listening to him talk about this interview setup. And he said the light actually blew up, and they were kind of embarrassed because it was Steven Spielberg, and it's like Steven Spielberg's probably seen everything. So it's kind of a neat story of him who works in Hollywood, and he was doing an interview project. Okay, so with an interview, you're going to have questions ready to ask the person you're going to interview. Find somebody with an interesting story or something you're interested in. You'd be surprised. Everybody has a story to tell. Okay, so don't think that, oh, I can't find somebody to interview, that wouldn't be the most exciting person or anything like that. Everybody has a story to tell. Okay, so things you need to do: have questions ready, have a handful of questions. Okay, have the interview repeat questions. So if you ask me, like you're interviewing, you say, Bob, how old are you? And I say, 51. The first way I'm going to show you, I don't have the interviewer on there asking the question. I never wanted my voice on when I interview. So when I ask people questions, I want them to repeat the answer. So I would say, okay, would you repeat my questions when you answer the question? So if I say, how old are you? It would be, I'm 51 years old. That way you don't hear just 51. And on the first question, I usually put a couple questions together. I'll say like, okay, if I was interviewing myself, I'd say, tell me your name and what you do for a living. And so the question I would answer, my name is Bob Moss, and I've worked at Metropolitan Community College for 25 years. I've been teaching for 19 years, and I was a producer director for 6 years. So it gives a nice little intro. Okay, but again, have the people repeat the question. So if the interviewer is not on the video, you don't have to worry about it. So don't give them where they can say yes and no and yes and no. Years ago, I was watching Katie Couric do an interview when she was on the Today Show. And she had this guy that rode his horse to work, and they still had an old Western hitching post. She had him off the air so fast it was sickening because she saw the interview wasn't going anywhere, and it was live, so that's why she had to get it off with. She goes, so you'd ride your horse to work? And he answered, yes. And he didn't say anything else. And then she asked the second question. He gave a yes or no. And she goes, oh, thanks for being with us today. And she got him off the air because he was not doing a good job talking. And that was live. But on something like this, it's like, so you ride your horse to work? Oh, and yeah, I do ride my horse to work every day. We got a hitching post. It works that way. So have them repeat the question. Okay. Leave noise room. So this was an interview. If I would, compose it, and if I was talking to, like, tell me your name. My name is Bob Moss. I work at Metropolitan Community College. They're not looking right at the camera. They're talking to the interviewer. Okay. And I always remind them, okay, you're talking to me. Don't worry about the camera, because some people will be back and forth between the interview and the camera, and it looks odd. Okay. The other thing, take any gum, anything like that away so they're not chomping. Don't get too profiled, so if you're talking to them, put the person on whichever side of the camera. Okay. Again, nose room, good composition of the shot, make it look good, make people look good. Don't have people slouch, have a nice background, make people look good on camera. Okay, and keep it eye level. So you're not looking up their nose or down their nose, something like that. Okay, and I'll show examples of this when I set up an interview. Okay, so we're going to talk about 3 different ways and kind of the main way of doing this. Okay, when I set up an interview, I usually set up the camera, I compose the shot, I white balance, I get a good exposure, I get them in focus. So that's back to day 1 type of stuff or day 2 stuff. And I get good sound. We just talked about sound. I would put a lav mic or a boom mic on and make it look nice, really nice. And then I would set up one shot and I would go through all my questions. Okay? And then I'm done. If I need to elaborate on questions, or I'll always say, do you want to add something in? So I have one shot, and it's kind of a medium shot to a close-up shot. Okay, I think we ended on B-roll. So you're going to do your interview. You've shot it with one way, and I don't want to see jump cuts. So a jump cut is a shot to a shot. So if I'm talking for 5 minutes and you use 2 minutes of it, you're going to have cuts in there from the same shot to the same shot. So that would be a jump cut. So you would see just a little click, 1 frame edit where my head would shift or something because you're going to a different time. So that's where you'll have B-roll or cover. So the cover actually covers that edit up. So you think I said that all in one, you interviewed me for 5 or 10 minutes, but you only have 2 minutes in your finished story. So you're going to have cuts in there. So you don't really want to show those cuts because, again, they'll be jump cuts the way they're set up. So you'll have cover. So whatever I'm talking about. So I'm going to interview me about living in an old schoolhouse. So I'm going to have a lot of shots of the old schoolhouse I live in, okay, when I do my example interview, okay? So that would be your cover and your B-roll. Okay, so number one way would be one shot, and you'll have your cover and B-roll. Okay, the second way to do this is you have your list of questions, and we're going to make this look like we have 3 cameras, but we only have 1, okay? So we're going to do the standard one shot, we're going to do the interview. Then we're going to do a wider shot, and we're going to do the interview. Then we're going to do a tight shot, and we're going to do the interview. So you have me answer the question 3 times. It takes a little bit longer, but it gives us what looks like better production quality. So we can go I said you couldn't use jump cuts before. So we could go from the medium shot to a tight shot. So let's say I get more emotional and I start talking about something that affected me in life. You could go from the medium to the tight shot, or you could go from the tight shot to the wider shot. So it looks like you have 3 cameras, even though you have 1 camera, okay? You just go through the questions 3 times, okay? So that's way 2. And then the third way is we can add the interviewer in. So it's much like the first, but what we do is you ask all the questions, you set up the shot, good audio, all that, and you you ask the questions, and then when you're done, you turn the camera back around on the interviewer. You got the list of questions, you mic the interviewer, and they would just go, okay, tell me your name and how long you've been at Metropolitan Community College. Then they'd get on their list, and they wouldn't do the interview again, they would just be reading off the questions. So you pause, next question, pause, next question. And then you in post will edit the questions to the interview. So it's 1 camera, but it looks like 2 cameras because it looks like you have a camera on the interview and a camera on the interviewed person. So that's how you would do it. So that would be the third way. So 1 shot on the first one. The second way would be to have multiple shots, wide, medium, and tight. And then the third way is you add the interviewer. And you can do a combination of these interviews too. Another way to do interviews is you could follow the interview around. If you guys have watched different reality shows, documentaries, sometimes they're just interviewing the person and they're following them around while they're doing what they're doing. So if you've watched any of the Tiger King documentary, which is kind of the most popular show on TV right now, there's portions where the camera crew's just following the people and they're interviewing them. It's not a traditional sit-down interview. Okay, so I will send you a list of examples to watch too, and I will also do a little interview to show you kind of what one looks like. Okay, so again, white balance, good focus, good exposure, good composition. Everything's building together in one, you know. And now we're at an audio. This is the first one we're going to grade you for. Your audio is important. We want good audio for the interview. Okay, and again, I will send you examples. And again, if you interview somebody for 20 minutes, you don't want a 20-minute interview. You want an interesting, you know, 2 to 5 minute interview. You're not going to use every word somebody says. Think how boring this is to watch. Imagine, you know, so I talked to somebody for 2 hours, it'd be a 2-hour documentary. An example of this is I did an interview for this gentleman from Washington State contacted me, and they were working on a documentary of B-29 pilots from World War II. And he ran out of money, but he still had people to interview around the country. And with us having an office at Air Force Base, there was a B-29 photographer in Bellevue, so I went down and interviewed him. I have 4 hours worth of tape on this guy, just talking to him, interviewing him. There's probably they probably used a minute to 2 minutes of that 4 hours, you know. So you need to keep it interesting and tell a story without boring people, because you don't want people to turn it off. Okay, so that's kind of the overview of how to set up an interview. And again, I will have another video showing you kind of a screen capture of how to edit it, and also an example.